Can you believe The Exorcist is now 50 years old? It's hard to imagine how the cinematic landscape would look like if it hadn't come along. Because let's face it, its influence literally changed the world of the horror genre overnight, and its impact on pop culture was immediate, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Now that the new David Gordon Green trilogy has been unleashed to audiences, it's time to revisit the original classic. So just in case you have been living under a rock for the last half a century, let's revisit what it's actually about. Regan, a 12-year-old child, starts to display frightening personality changes. After endless fails from medical professionals to provide a diagnosis and solution, her desperate mother Chris becomes convinced her daughter is possessed by evil. Turning to the church, she seeks the support from Father Karras, a troubled Jesuit priest who is battling his own personal demons. Soon Father Karras joins forces with the renowned Father Merrin to perform an exorcism to save the innocent child from the clutches of the devil himself. Now before I start, I must admit tackling this masterpiece of cinema feels really intimidating. What a challenge. I mean, what is there left to say that isn't already known? Well, as a huge fan of this film, I accept the challenge, and I'll give you 5 reasons why I think this is possibly the best of the horror genre. Number 5, ingenious lack of soundtrack. So, the opening piano riff to Tubular Bells is perfect to accompany this masterpiece. It isn't classical or progressive, and to describe it, well, it's eerie, offers a strange time signature, it's creepy and atmospheric. Composed by a then virtually unknown Mike Oldfield for Virgin Records, it was then chosen by William Friedkin because it sounded childlike. However, it's actually more underused than you'd think. In fact, it's probably the only hint of a score that this movie gives us. The Exorcist isn't traditionally scored in any true sense. Instead, Friedkin gives us an immersive, experimental soundscape. There's the buzzing of bees, snarling animals, layered industrial sounds, and extracts from Christoph Pendricki's creepy experimental Polymorphia, which is truly spine-tingling, like spiders crawling down your back. Number 4, unsettling subliminal imagery and scenes that can still shock after 50 years. Now, everyone is well aware of scenes in this film that have almost ingrained themselves in public consciousness. Even in 2023, there are still some scenes that make you hold your breath for a moment or two, and you know which scenes they are. I can't imagine how people would have reacted back in 1973 when the biggest scares came from Hammer horror movies. As one of the key movies of the 1970s, this film gave a huge sucker punch to the public and had people queuing in all weathers to see it. Despite its shocking scenes, it brought a refinement and respect to the genre, and even attracted those who wouldn't normally go to see a horror film. Owen Rosman's cinematography is simply stunning and provides images that have become legendary and provide that eerie sense of something of the everyday being slightly off. Not to mention those terrifying flashing images of that single white face, it's enough to give you nightmares. Now, my parents were newlyweds at the time and saw this on its initial run, and they were scarred for life. I mean, my mother had to sleep with the light on for weeks afterwards when my dad worked away, and she still won't rewatch it to this day. The Exorcist delves into the complex intersection of fear and faith and addresses questions of good and evil, belief and skepticism, and the battle between supernatural forces and human vulnerability. These themes resonate with audiences on a deep and timeless level. And after decades of parodies, rip-offs, sequels, prequels, it might not have the same impact on first-time audiences now, but there's simply nothing that has matched the raw, visceral power of its initial outing. And now we have David Gordon Green's trilogy in our screens, and at first glimpse I've got to admit it looks like a watered-down PG version that focuses more on the horror elements of this film, but I'll probably still check it out and keep an open mind. But I think Green already knows you can't outdo the power and complex DNA that makes this film so unique. Number 3, the only horror movie to be nominated for Best Picture Oscar. Okay, so Silence of the Lambs is often given this credit, but it's not a true horror movie. For me, horror is what crosses the boundary of what can actually happen and what takes us into the realms of what can be arguably fantasy. And Silence of the Lambs, as scary as it is, feels more of an investigative thriller and much more grounded in reality. To a degree, the same can be said about The Exorcist, believe it or not. It plays for the most part as a heavyweight personal drama and has a police investigation subplot taking place regarding the mysterious death of film director Burke Dennings. Although it has an unusual approach here because Lieutenant Kinderman is actually on the back foot to us, the audience. He's maybe grown more and more suspicious that something is going on with Regan, but he and the rest of the outside world in The Exorcist are out of the loop with the satanic goings-on within the walls of the McNeil residence. It's unlike any horror film that had been made before or since and offers weighty knockout performances, an immersive slow burn with no cheap scares. It offers no explanations to any of the horror that takes place, but opts to make us, the audience, feel the message of the story through its characters. And it was nominated for a staggering 10 Oscar nominations. Number 2, William Friedkin's masterful direction. William Friedkin's tight direction skillfully builds tension and unease throughout the film. His use of practical effects, subtle camera work, and the unsettling imagery creates an atmosphere of dread that continues to captivate audiences to this day. He might have started out small in television and even directed the dotty Sonny and Cher vehicle Good Times, but he soon found a platform to establish his niche with the natural, sobering, gritty documentary style that he used for his Best Picture winning The French Connection. This was much further accentuated in The Exorcist, which is his most celebrated and accomplished film for me. Here he brings a natural, stark realism that has not been seen again. Maybe Hereditary is the closest so far, I feel. We feel we are eavesdropping on real conversations, and the film presents scenes of unspeakable horror in such sobering reality, it's hard to shake off. There are rumours that William Friedkin would almost do anything to get the right take from his actors. He'd even shoot off loud noises to surprise them, hit them in the face, or even possibly cause permanent back injuries to Ellen Burstyn. Okay, before we move to number 1, let me move to the bit I always love, where I give you a few jaw-dropping facts about The Exorcist that you may not know. So, let's go. Did you know that a lot of critics, particularly the New York Times, caused an outcry why The Exorcist wasn't given an X rating in America, which would forbid children from seeing it at all? In fact, police in Washington DC threatened to arrest anyone who sold cinema tickets to see the film to any non-adults. Did you know that The Exorcist was removed from the UK video rental shelves after the Video Recordings Act was passed in 1984? It took 15 years for it to finally reappear. Now, I actually own this vintage Super 8 edition, which is a specially edited version which runs around 10 minutes. I played it once and it's a very odd cut of the film, but it does show all of the nasty scenes in their entirety. Did you know that despite popular belief, the name Pazuzu is never mentioned in the film or William Peter Blatty's novel on which it's based on? Instead, the identity of the evil inhabiting Regan names itself as the devil himself. Pazuzu didn't come around till 1977's woeful sequel Exorcist II: The Heretic, but let's not go there. Did you know that the terrifyingly gravelly satanic voice that erupts from Linda Blair's mouth sounds pained, guttural and full of ancient rage? And it actually came from a celebrated actress, Mercedes McCambridge, who was once described by Orson Welles as the world's greatest living radio actress. She broke her sobriety, gargled raw eggs, chain smoked to make her voice wheeze, gurgle and wail, and stay in your nightmares forever. Did you know that the Catholic Church were huge supporters of the film? By suggesting the existence of the devil, it turns so many people to return to the church and highlights the Catholic priests in the film as heroes. So here I am back and ready to give you my number 1 reason why The Exorcist stands a spinning head and shoulders above the rest. And so, here it is. Number 1, the finest acting you'll ever see in a horror movie. The characters in this film are so nuanced and showcases powerful performances that certainly give this film its timeless power. So let's start with Ellen Burstyn's Chris McNeil. She's in the role as a desperate mother who will go to any lengths to cure her sick daughter Regan. Now you almost feel the anxiety that she projects as a distraught, helpless parent trying to make sense of the unimaginable horror that she has to deal with. Jason Miller's devastating performance as Father Damien Karras is equally heavyweight. He's doubting his faith and is crippled with guilt over the death of his mother. Is he the best person to help Reagan? Well, even we aren't sure. For me, these two excellent actors should have cleaned up at the Oscars with these iconic, meaty roles, and this level of performance is not something we would normally find in a horror film. Now, the highest respects also go to Max von Sydow as Father Merrin, Linda Blair as the helpless child Reagan, who undergoes the most hideous transformation, Lee J. Cobb as Lieutenant Kinderman, and once again Mercedes McCambridge's ability to create that character from the dubbing she provided. It may be the best horror film of all time by my reckoning, but is it the scariest? Well, it depends on your fear factor. Now, my dad was so traumatised he outlawed it completely from ever coming in our family home, which made me want to see it more and more. I secretly read the book, listened to Tubular Bells, and tried to imagine the horrors that would accompany it on the screen. There just wasn't any way I could get a copy of it here in England for over 15 years. It's a film that certainly gets better with age and with repeated viewings. Now, most teens watch the film as a rite of passage, usually only to view the iconic bits, and they often report to find it funny or boring, but there's so many layers to rediscover that is so expertly woven in by Friedkin, William Peter Blatty, and the wonderful cast and crew who work so hard on the movie itself. So, happy 50th birthday to The Exorcist, and thank you for the nightmares. I'm Craig from Wookie Video, and I love to write these love letters to some of my favourite films of all time. But if you have an idea, why not comment, and maybe I'll cover it in a future episode. Also, if you like my channel, it would be super nice to get a like, a share, or hit the subscribe button. It really helps me to grow this channel. So next week, as we get closer to Halloween, we look at the hilarious Hocus Pocus. I hope you can join me then. So, until next time, hasta la vista.